maybe before, you can join me up there. I'm going to talk a little bit and before introducing our panelists, but please come on up. You know, Puya mentioned about AdTech, and actually this is our second attempt to really see if AdTech can have a sort of standalone vertical. But to just kind of give you some perspective, we opened an insurance vertical about 6 months ago, and we had State Farm, Allstate, Allianz, Travelers, USAA. I think last count we have 26 Aflac. We have 26 insurance companies that come to Plug and Play to see innovation that may disrupt their business or may complement their digital transformation. I don't know about you guys, but I think the insurance industry is one of the biggest advertisers in the world. And it's mainly to attract the customer, path to purchase. But when I meet, like this afternoon, we have the CEO of Travelers coming. Some of the insurance companies that are honest, they say we've been serving the metrics of how many policies we write, how we can serve our agents to serve the customer. How do we assess risk? The final customer which actually pays for the policy was their fifth metric that they were focusing on. But similar to banking, similar to e-commerce, retail, I think all of this will change. You have to first focus on the customer, first focus what the needs of the customers are, when do they want to buy, clothing, where do they want to buy it, and how do they want to buy it. And I think that's applicable in every industry. Also, to give you a little more perspective, one of our biggest verticals is mobility or auto industry. And we work very, very closely with Mercedes. Mercedes head of revenue, his name is Ula, and he said, Saeed, we love our dealerships, but the customer expects a different experience. And he said that we would like to know Saeed Amidi so well that we know he's like affluent and he changed his car every 3 years. And we would like to send a S-Class Mercedes to his house 3 months before he's thinking of changing a car. And we would like to go through our dealership, for example, in Redwood City, but they have to know me so well that every 3 months, I may lease a car, I may buy it, let's say $100,000 car, and I think that is why we are here. Because the AdTech, or the path to purchase, I think totally has changed. I tell you, I like these little anecdote stories. We showed you a picture of the Google team in 165 University Avenue. One of my best friend is Omid Kordestani. And he joined Google when Google was 9 people. He built the business model, and then he executed the revenue model from 0 to $10 billion faster than any other company in the world. And like going back, I think Google is how old now? About 15 years old? Going back around 12 years, he said, Saeed, the advertising business at that time was $500 billion, and we would like 20% of that business. And I said, are you crazy? There is TV, radio, newspaper, this, that. And I think last count, Google is around $70 billion between their AdSense and YouTube advertising. So I truly feel this AdTech or path to purchase will affect the auto industry, banking industry, insurance industry, fashion industry, and the way, as our panelists will explain, is how can you get in front of that curve and help these giants transform the way they interact with their final client. I think that would be the real success story if we can build an AdTech innovation platform, or maybe we should even call it customer platform. But with that, Tom, I would love you to give you a little introduction about yourself and your firm, and what do you think about this path to purchase?
Sure. My name is Tom Bedecaray, and currently I'm a student at Stanford University. I'm working on a fellowship, but I'm one of the co-founders of AKQA, the digital agency, and president of WPP Ventures, who bought our company 4 years ago. And I guess just picking up your talk about your car and insurance, I'm not sure why in the future, if you ever got in an accident and the airbag in your Mercedes went off, that Mercedes wouldn't want to deliver you a car the next day, or why Travelers Insurance maybe, if your phone had a certain accelerator hit of certain G-force, that they wouldn't maybe give you an alert or speak with you. Just as we're getting more and more signals from customers, why not incorporate that into the messaging? But I think on a more common basis, certainly what I think is going to happen is if you just follow the trajectory of Google, which I think started in '99, so they're 17 years old. We're so accustomed to having machines make media buying decisions, but I think there's still a lot of kind of fear and intimidation about machines building creative messaging and content that will go with that. And so I think that's really one of the big opportunities is to have an automation of the creative side of the platform as much as our buying selections are made by machine right now.
And if I can have an add-on, I think again WPP is one of the companies which purchase your firm, and with this buying sort of programs and everything, at least in the beginning everybody thought some of these agencies would lose some business, but there is still a finesse in where do you spend your ad dollars. What do you think about that, if you could add on some more to that solution?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of finesse in how you put a buy together, and I think there are some media buying agencies and partners that do it better than others. But I do think that maybe the industry is pretty far along in terms of using technology and using data to improve a media buy so that you're not just targeting one audience. When I started in the advertising industry more than 30 years ago, there was always this one target audience, women 25 to 54, and that was the extent of your audience. Might be geographic skew, there might be an income skew, but it was this one big bucket. Now the clients that we work for might have 10 or 100 different micro targets, and that's very sophisticated on the targeting and buying side. I think it's not very sophisticated on creating content and message for 10 or 100 audiences. Tends to be just one or two ads that you recycle, even though you've identified 100 sub-targets.
Wonderful. Tom, let me, before I introduce Joshua, tell you another little story that Omid, who helped build the revenue model for Google before he was working for Netscape, which also had a browser, from what I remember. And he kind of kept telling me, as well as his management, that we are the gateway to the web. We should monetize whatever we want at this gate. And quite frankly, that's what they did at Google, providing search and then trying to monetize it at the gateway. Coming from Mozilla, what are the challenges you are facing, as well as how do you work with some of the people to be more effective marketeers?
Okay. Well, thank you for having me here, so appreciate that. My name's Yasha Kakis-Wolf. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Mozilla. I've been a marketer for the last 15 years running marketing teams, but if I were to describe myself kind of amongst a group of friends, I'd say that I'm a product person who accidentally found my way into marketing 15 years ago. I think that's relevant as we consider how products try and solve a specific problem and the rigor that goes into developing and launching products. Because my experience coming into marketing, right, showed very differently than what we see in product development. I saw marketing as an industry and a practice that was pretty broken and pretty inefficient. So the thread in my professional career has been pulling in product process, so the lean, scrum, agile, into marketing organizations, and then applying a lot of rigor and using data and technology. When I think about the investment that you're making in AdTech, I think it's very important. And in fact, I'd broaden it out to more than just AdTech, and then we'll talk about the world that I'm in now and some of the challenges or the opportunities that we see in the world about marketing tech generally. So advertising is one component of what marketing is responsible for. And to Tom's point, we've seen a lot of technological advances over the course of the last decade that help us be a lot more efficient. Right? Software should be a leverage for us to help us be more efficient, more effective as marketers. But that's not the full picture of what marketing is responsible for. You know, Tom mentioned now some organizations, and generally I'm going to guess that the ones that you've talked to are more sophisticated, larger, have a lot more resource, are able to identify 10, 100 different discrete audiences and then start to develop programs against them. But the process of research, to doing audience identification, to truly understanding needs of those audiences is actually incredibly inefficient right now. So there's an opportunity when we think about marketing technology more broadly to think about that research piece and how the work that may be happening from this cohort of people could contribute to that. Past that, there is the development of content, right? How do you create purchase consideration? How do you create kind of longer, kind of more trusting relationship with your customers and your prospects? And then ultimately get through that purchase and then maintain that relationship. Like, we have bits and pieces of technology that sit in all those different areas, but when we think holistically about marketing technology, I don't know that we're applying the same rigor to each of the different areas that we're responsible for operating on behalf of our business as marketers. So I think it's a really important area to consider investing in, especially when you consider the verticals that you've already begun to invest in. And kudos to everybody here that's thinking about spending time in marketing and advertising technology, because there's a lot of leverage to be had as marketers. I joined Mozilla about 1.5 years ago, and I did so for highly personal reasons. We're all probably thinking about the economic outcomes for us individually and potentially the mission that we have as an organization and the companies and the products that we're starting. I'm not looking to get rich, and I really care quite a bit I'm a very privileged person. I'm in my 40s, I'm Caucasian, and I'm in Silicon Valley, and I recognize that. And I've had a successful track record, and what I've been looking for professionally is to find a place that had mission alignment for me personally, that let me use some of the tools that I've been building up as a marketer over the course of the last couple of decades, and apply them in a way that I think can be meaningful and impactful, greater than just creating wealth, right, for investors or for myself. And as an organization, as Mozilla, to get to the point about browsers, we think about the way that the world and the internet in particular is evolving in a very different way than that we're trained to with kind of the economic realities of most of the businesses that we're a part of here. And that's specifically thinking about how do we create better user agency. Right? The browser is a point of your interaction with the internet where it represents you. When you show up at a website, it allows for certain data to be passed to that website, right, to that business. There's a bunch of conveniences that we've appreciated over the course of the last couple of decades because of the advancement of the internet, but there haven't really been a lot of watchdogs that have helped us as individuals recognize what we're giving up. I think we're getting to a point over the course of the next several years where as marketers, we have to make a decision on how we're going to interact with our customers, what kind of trust we want to develop for them over time. And that means we're going to have to make decisions on the type of software that we use and the type of practices that we have. Right? And then we're going to need to expose what we've made decisions on to our customers. So when I think about advertising technology, marketing technology more broadly, and a lens that I take personally and that we do as an organization, it's really around how do we apply an ethical or moral view into the type of work and the type of products that could come out of this cohort of people. Right? It's a bit of a different bent, but it still seems right.
Maybe I give you a loaded question. What would be your metrics of success for 2016?
Yeah. So
how do you measure?
Much like everyone here, we have to care about growth. When more people use the products or the services or participate in the advocacy programs that we develop, it helps us create more value in the world. So we have to care about growth. Purchase intent, right? Understanding purchase intent, understanding actual purchase. We just happen to give away things for free. It's still purchase though. So we think about it very much like everybody here would. What is our quarterly goal? What's our daily active users? How are we driving to greater daily active users? That may be where many organizations stop. What I care about is how well I'm growing. In addition to that, we have a trust score that we've developed, kind of a combination of NPS and a handful of other things. And then we have a brand perception study that we run at an incredibly high frequency. And for us, we actually look at all three of those different areas of measures as equally important. Growth, for the sake of growth, doesn't work. Growth with a strong relationship with our customers is important. Growth with a strong relationship with our customers and strong resonance in the attributes that we care about in our brand for them to know is also important. So it's really thinking about holistically that whole customer relationship, right, to your earlier story.
Last question, how do you enjoy competing with Google and Microsoft?
Well, it's kind of scary, to be honest. Like, we're an 1,100 person organization, and many people don't know that. In fact, many people don't know that Mozilla is a not-for-profit. So there's an expectation that maybe because there's a browser that's out there that you might use instead of Chrome or with Chrome, that we're the same size as them. But in fact, our team is about the same size as the strategy team that works on Chrome. Right? So it's scary. My responsibility in our organization is to try and find opportunities for asymmetric leverage. How do we create leverage that helps us grow in a way that maybe Google wouldn't consider growing? That could be around positioning. It could be around developing a trusted relationship with a big constituency of customers. So that's fun, right? It's scary, but it's also pretty fun.
Wonderful. Congratulations. Lisa, maybe you can tell a little bit about yourself and your company, because I think you're a subsidiary of a much larger company.
That's right.
But also maybe take a first crack at it. How do you see the path to purchase works now? And then how do you think it will work 5 years from now? I just came back from Money 2020, and we had banks, panelists, Kohl's was there, and everybody's talking about the young generation path to purchase. I consider myself young, I don't know about you guys. It's going to totally change, but with that, Lisa,
Sure.
please go ahead.
Absolutely. So I'm Lisa Sullivan. I head up the technology practice for Ketchum, which is a global PR and integrated communications firm. As you say, we're part of Omnicom, so part of a much larger umbrella. Within the technology group, we work with some really big global brands like IBM, some mid-sized companies and some startups. But probably more interesting and more relevant than that for this group is really looking at technology more as a horizontal expertise than as a vertical sector, right? So every company arguably today, any successful company arguably today, needs to on some level be a technology firm. So we do a lot of work at the intersection points between technology and other sectors like healthcare, finance, fashion, food and agriculture. Those are all industries that are being disrupted by technology and also are using technology not just to communicate to their customers and other stakeholders, but to really engage with them in new ways. And I think that's really where this path to purchase question comes in. We talked a little bit, Tom mentioned the micro-targeting that technology allows. When you think about the old model, you were able to perhaps test a message or test a campaign with a small focus group. You could benchmark before a campaign and after a campaign to see how much you'd move the needle. But using technology, you can really experiment in real time and be much, much more precise, not just with the vehicle or the medium through which you're telling your message, but actually with the message itself. And there seems to be a theme here of talking about automakers, so I'll carry on with that. One of, I think, the most interesting experiment-type case studies I've seen recently was with GM, where they ran a campaign in Chicago. It was an outdoor campaign, so not online, but using technology to really hyper-personalize. And what they did was put a sensor about 1,000 feet ahead of a billboard, and they would literally recognize which car you were driving. And by the time you got to the billboard, it would be serving you an ad that said, this GM model has better safety features than the Volkswagen Passat that you're driving, for example. So super, super targeted and personalized. And I think as we look forward to what technology will enable in the future, we can expect to see a lot more of those kinds of experiments.
That's like, I know we had yesterday Procter and Gamble here, and if I remember right, their advertising budget is around $8 billion. Coca-Cola, I don't know what is their advertising budget, but they say 20% of their top line, the franchises have to spend on advertising. It's like the biggest item after sugar, I believe. It's the same thing, sugar and advertising, that goes hand in hand. But I wanted to start with you, Tom. I want to see if, with your experience, which industry do you think has gone through the biggest disruption by forgetting, what the customer needs are, and sort of has really changed? I have some ideas, but I leave mine for last. I am.
Give me an example. I'm not sure exactly what.
So, like, for example, I had the founders of Airbnb here when they were 3 people and they had 600 units that they were renting. About a month ago, for our travel and hospitality unit, we had Chip Conley here. And Chip said now they have 2.2 million units, and in one day they rented it out 1 million rooms without owning any of the rooms. I don't think, have you seen their new advertising? So Airbnb now says, we don't really rent rooms, we rent experiences in destinations. And again, I think they have interrupted an industry like nobody else, but I was wondering if you could come up with an industry that was not looking out for themselves and they became, disrupted because of an advertising campaign, or maybe even what is your favorite advertising campaign this year?
Sure. Well, just, you talked about Airbnb and hospitality. I think the other one, when people think about Uber, I think a lot of times they think about how that's disrupted the taxi industry, but what I see it as being more disruptive too is the automobile industry, and that it's significantly changed how people think about car ownership, and that millennials are significantly less interested in owning a car than when I grew up. When I grew up and you turned 16, you wanted your driver's license, you wanted to drive. As soon as you could own a car, you wanted to have a car, and that was a huge sign of adulthood. And I think, one company, Uber, has completely changed an outlook of how, and the other ride-sharing platforms, I think also Zipcar, the idea that I don't need to own a car, but I can have access to a car, I can have access to a ride whenever I want, has been incredibly disruptive. And, all you have to do is look around what's happening in the Valley and see, investments in chariot ride services, and I think Palo Alto, Ford is sponsoring the new bicycle sharing system, and so car companies are having to think about themselves more broadly as transportation providers, and I think they're going to have to compete for being the car of choice for ride sharing services more than they're going to be the car of choice for that young new driver, new 16-year-old with a driver's license.
You know, like GM just invested $500 million in Lyft. I was with Mark Fields in their facility in Palo Alto, where he changed the name of the company, and he said that we are going back to our roots, that when Mr. Ford started Ford, it wanted to give freedom of mobility to American people to live inside of the cities or outside in the suburbs. And he actually changed the car company's name to Ford Mobility instead of Ford Car. So I agree with you 100%.
I mean, just to give you an example, AKQA, my agency, has developed the Audi USA website, and we try to personalize that experience so that when someone comes to the site, they don't get a generic homepage for Audi USA cars, but that we're going to use technology to guess who it is that's hitting the site and give them the car that we think they want to buy. And so, for example, I know early on we did some research, and that if it was a Firefox user in San Francisco, we knew that was probably an A4 intended buyer, and if it was an old Internet Explorer user in Omaha, we knew that was a Q7 80% chance buyer. And so depending on who was hitting the website, we would serve the car we think you want to buy instead of having the lineup of cars or some generic homepage.
Very good. Maybe with that segue, do you help any of these big brands sort of focus their mobile marketing or web marketing to the focus buyer? Because that's really the theme of today. We will see unbelievable startups like XAd who say they do one-to-one delivery of ad, trying to see where the customer is. Like if you're in the Ford lot, they will serve you BMW advertising across the street. But with that, do you guys help your clients do that through the browser?
So we don't. We're impartial as an organization, so we build a product that allows for people to access content, right? And that's the intent. Accessibility of that content is particularly important. So I would maybe even segue this and add on to the answer that Tom gave you, but maybe from an inverse point of view. I think when we look across industries, there are some specific industries that are really struggling with adapting to the advancements in technology. And they're ones that we actually rely on that are infrastructure, right? And I think the broader question is, like, how can we as technology companies support? And I think when we look at our national government and our state governments in particular, like, how can we help them advance their use of technology to be more effective at delivering the right message to the right constituencies? The technological advancements in marketing and the sophistication of many marketing organizations that are large, like let's call it the automobile industry more broadly, haven't applied themselves into areas in our day-to-day lives that are incredibly important, and that are infrastructural pieces of our world. So I'm always curious about how we, as kind of investors in technology or participants in developing product ideas or kind of go-to-market programs for our companies, can actually support developing better infrastructure, or at least supporting infrastructure for these really, really incredibly important activities that take place in our day-to-day lives that don't benefit from the things that we do on a day-to-day basis.
Wonderful. And same question for you. Do you have any particular campaign that was missed and the industry sort of fall behind, or vice versa, some campaign that really took the industry to the next level? I had the CEO of Colgate here, and as I am guilty, when I brush my teeth, I leave the water on. And they did a huge campaign in Africa that when you brush your teeth, if you turn the water off, how much savings of water is going to be, and how it could affect health and everything. Yeah. Is there any specific aha moment for you or your organization that you could share with us?
Sure. I think going back to the earlier point around which industries have been successful and which are perhaps lagging behind, I think a lot of it comes down to how close those industries already are to their consumer. So thinking about markets that are really highly regulated, or where there is an intermediary in between the company that's ultimately selling the product and the buyer, those are often the industries that have struggled the most. So you've mentioned insurance being one. I think healthcare is potentially another, where the consumer, the patient, the buyer of that industry is perhaps further along the path to purchase digitally than the industry is catching up. And we just did some research at Ketchum into mobile health, where we looked at different levels of adoption among consumers and really found that people are much further along that path than perhaps the industry is ready to catch up with. So I think that, to us, that's a huge opportunity, right? Where the healthcare industry has got, that they could open some really interesting doors there.
You know, just do little bit changes from the automotive industry to health. I think the health industry in US is so broken because the decision maker really is the reimburser, right, which in a lot of cases is Medicare or Medi-Cal or sometimes the insurance companies. And the choice of what customer buys is which doctor you go to that you could get reimbursement with. And it's happening more and more even with drugs. Yeah. That what you qualify for. But you know, the whole, if I could use the platform to say, we do have an incredible health, connected health, we call it practice. We have a mobility practice. But I was wondering if we really embrace this path to purchase of consumer, calling it AdTech and customer experience. Do you think we can build momentum around it with you and your firm, as well as with some of your customers? And maybe we can start with you on this side.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with any of these industries that are looking to disrupt or looking to think about different paths to purchase, it's really a question of having people that can bridge both sides and bring them together. So I think having experts that are able to talk in the language of the consumer and in the language of whoever it is that is currently the gatekeeper is really critical.
So for me, I'd say that any of the organizations that are represented here, I think, are active participants or want to be active participants in the development or the advancement of this industry that you're talking about, customer experience and or kind of path to purchase. What I would say is that each of us are representing different groups that have different perspectives. And part of what I would counsel to everybody that's here is that when you're looking to build constituency, it's really important to collect a diversity of opinion, like as you're going into developing your product, finding your product market fit. And so it's not a homogenous group that we're representing here. We all have different perspectives from the organizations that we're part of. And as you're starting to explore the areas that you're going to make investments in, search out kind of groups that are not representing exactly who you're trying to sell to homogenously, exactly, right? Because that's going to better your possibilities in finding that product market fit and ultimately having success in the market.
Tom?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the companies today. You mentioned the one-to-one marketing, so I think there's still a lot of innovation and personalization in AdTech, that especially on the creative side that we talked about. You know, everything from just resizing and reformatting to I think we're not far from having machines create messages that are personalized for people, which would be really cool. The other area that I think is really important is getting more immersive. And so Omnivert, which is one of the companies that I'm looking forward to seeing today. I don't know if Michael Rucker's here yet, but I've met Michael before, and I think having a 360 VR kind of experience in an ad format will be really exciting for people. And then the other area that I think is really underdeveloped is just technology to combat ad fraud. There's a huge amount of clicks that are either machine clicks or that are not visible ad units that an advertiser is being charged for both. And that could be as much as 25 or 50%, depending on who's buying your media and whether you have someone who knows how to combat that. But I think there's a huge opportunity for technology to combat ad fraud.
That ad fraud is, I think, both ad fraud as well as the effectiveness of your ads. I think it's the $1 million solution. Just to use personal experience. we have a little company in Spain called Aquaservice, and we do like TV ads, we do Facebook ads, we do Instagram ads and Google ads. But the whole industry is changing so fast that 1 month we have much better results on Facebook, and the next month we have much better results on Google. And sort of being nimble and being able to try different things and see what works, I think is the future of advertising. And we still do email marketing and affiliated marketing, but they have come down so much lower in our priorities of what is the cost of acquisition of an account and what sort of relationship you build with your customers, even based on your advertising, because it has to feel good even if they don't buy your product or they don't need it today. But really the star of the show today are the startups, but I wanted to thank you so much from our panelists to be here to kind of say a little point of view where the ad tech industry is going. Thank you.
Thank you.